When we were in one of the therapy sessions, someone shared something about their time when they were a child and they lived in care. And they shared some details about how it felt to have grown up in the care system, and what it was like to experience the feeling of moving on from home to home. And this struck a massive chord with me because my family fostered a little girl for some time, and it sort of broke my heart thinking that this girl might have experienced the same heartbreak of moving on prematurely, or, you know, with her future families not moving on quickly enough in homes that aren't necessarily the best for her. And yeah, I had this picture in my head of like straight away, and it's sort of like a darkness and then light that penetrates it. So I feel like it's important to make it while it's fresh and while it means something to me, so I can maybe process that whole thing a lot easier and better with a visual demonstration of how I feel, as well as just verbal. We were told she'd be with us for a couple of weeks or a month max, because she'd just been removed from her own home and they were trying to find a permanent home, and we were sort of semi-permanent foster carers. But in the end, she was actually with us for almost a year. She was quite a challenge, not in sort of the traditional way or the same way as you'd expect, or we were told on the fostering training, you know, with some kids stealing things and some kids trashing the place, and others being quite violent. But she was more like emotionally challenging, and that was tough, especially for my mum, who was the primary carer, really, because that was sort of a day in, day out battle that she had to kind of come up against. But obviously there were some really good times, and she formed some really good friendships with some kids of some families that we knew, and yeah, so it wasn't all really tough. But during the time that she stayed with us, my dad's sister really suddenly died of a brain tumour, and then my mum's dad became really ill, and it looked like he wasn't going to have really long left, and that kind of shook things up in our household a bit, and even though we were physically able to look after this girl, we were increasingly not able to look after her emotional needs. So yeah, well, essentially that led to a really tough decision making process that led to her moving on, and that was really, really tricky. but we all knew that, and including her, that this was the best way forward, and you know that she needed to be in a family that could cater for her emotional needs. And so she ended up moving on to a family that we actually knew, which was cool. It really softened the blow to know them. But this girl had never really known proper acceptance, or she'd never been exposed to a healthy family unit or healthy family lifestyle. And she'd never had good relationships with her family members, really. And so when she moved on, you know, we obviously had to deal with a lot of loss and grief ourselves, to do with our family members, but I found it particularly difficult feeling like we'd let her down, because, you know, we were meant to be this family that helped her to realise that she doesn't need to feel rejected, and she can feel at home, and she can feel worthy of love, and she doesn't have to earn anything. And then suddenly, you know, we rejected her, essentially, that, you know, that's how she saw it. Even though she understood that she couldn't live with us because it was best for both of us, or both parties, but, you know, in her mind, she was only young, and she must have seen it as us wanting her to go a little bit. So I think I felt really guilty that you know, we'd let her go prematurely, and there was still this really dark expanse of brokenness and disappointment and rejection and hurt and neglect, and that represents her, that blackness. And that's why it's really important to not use black paper, but to create this darkness, because, you know, she went through that process. She didn't choose that for herself. It was inflicted upon her. So she came to us as this kind of canopy of darkness, and these people here are my parents and me and my brother, who were the people that lived with her. My other siblings were at uni at the time. And I felt like we'd all let her down. I felt this unbelievable guilt that we hadn't done our job properly, and that we'd really let her down, because there was still all of this work to do, and we hadn't finished what we said we'd signed up to do. But I think, looking at this now, actually, what grips me is the white bits within the darkness, and that's what you first see. You see the darkness, but then you suddenly see the light. And I think, when I'm looking at it, actually, I can see that there's this worth of our time, and, you know, we made it worthwhile, and these holes of light in the canopy of darkness wouldn't have been there were it not for us. And, you know, that we did have a good impact. And when she goes on to the next family, that she you know, she's better than she was, and she's in a better place, and she physically is how she says she feels, which is much, much happier than when she first moved in. So yeah, I think this has been a really helpful process in guiding me to understand that, even though I felt this guilt at the time, actually what I failed to see was the light in the darkness. And I guess I'd just been looking at this this half here and missing this